Awesome. Well, welcome everyone to Storage Best Practices for HADR on IBMI. I'm Tom Huntington and joined by Chuck. We're going to talk about some best practices around reviewing your storage to improve efficiencies for, really disaster recovery, backups, planning, those kinds of things. So that's kind of the whole gist of this webinar. We have a couple polling questions for you today. Nothing too serious, a 20-minute webinar. 30-minute webinar, relatively quick. Let's see, what else can we tell you? It's being recorded, and certainly we are always happy to have a few questions along the way. Chuck, let's tell everybody about your background a little bit and what you do for Help Systems.
Sure, I've been in IT for a while now, more than 35 years, and been on IBMI AS400 back starting in 1990. Been at Help Systems for more than 22 years, focused on IBMI, mostly on the systems management, but I also work on the security side of the equation, especially around encryption. I'm also vice president of our local Q user IBMI focus group here in the Twin Cities.
Yeah, well, great. And I'm Tom Huntington. I'm an IBM Power Champion, plus sit on the executive team at Help Systems, so actively involved in many different things here at Help Systems. My main role, though, is helping our solution engineers who help present all of our products across the globe to our customers, which, believe it or not, Chuck, today we have some 60 professionals, full-time job, are doing demos, customer introductions, overviews, proof of concepts, proof of values with all of our customers. So the world's changed quite a bit here. Just this month I saw a number, we have now 1,800 employees. So life keeps marching on Help Systems. So I'm gonna turn off my camera now, and we'll get rolling into some content here, Chuck. Let's talk about some bad storage practices first. Let's be negative about what we've seen as we talk to customers. We see people often ignore disk cleanup, and I kind of equate it to during this period of time where we've been working from home and during this pandemic, that how many of you have finally cleaned out that closet or cleaned out your garage? But we often ignore our disk cleanup on IBMI. We're reactive to storage issues. We go over that threshold and then, oh my gosh, we got to clean everything up. Constantly worried about going over storage threshold. Some of you are always at that. We were talking yesterday, what's the right level that you should be under, and kind of the consensus was 80% as we were talking with experts from Common and IBM themselves, that keeping your storage under 80% is really kind of that comfort level. Storage cleanup's not automated. In a lot of cases, people are still doing things manually in that kind of reaction mode. Oh, we need storage, let's go clean up a bunch of things. You allow anyone to add libraries and directories to the system, which is just, a problem. Security, we can go on and on about that. And then I still run into many IBMI systems where developers are working on production systems and actually doing development on the production partition. It doesn't really cost you anything more to add another partition on IBMI, and many of us have plenty of room because we might only be running at 20% of processor throughout the day. Why not add another partition and segregate your developers? And then oversized systems because of wasteful disk space practices. You're spending too much money on storage in a lot of cases too, because people just aren't willing to clean things up. What are your thoughts, Chuck?
Well, Tom, I don't know if you've noticed, but the built-in storage cleanup tools on IBMI, such as retrieve disk info and retrieve directory info, are inadequate, difficult to work with. You have to, develop your own queries around that, the tables that are built there. One of the big issues I see, including with our products, is that they may have a purge incorporated into the application, but people aren't running it. They don't have it scheduled. Their history files are building up, and sometimes we go into some clients and they've got 20, 30, 40, 50 million history records where maybe they only need a couple 100,000. So that's a big area. Records retention, not in agreement with end users on how long to keep their data around. You must have some type of policy that says how long should your data stay online. All right, and that goes for both data as well as spool files. We go into some client sites and Tom, I know you talked about this just the other day. They've got decades of spool files out there on their system.
They're saving their end of month processing for decades. Yes.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So what are you doing? You're taking all that data and you're backing it up. So now your backups are taking longer. And likewise, you're replicating this old data off to another system. So that's the challenge that we are faced with.
Yep, those are some things that are pretty common things that we run into. So let's do our first polling question, Chuck. What are your disk storage challenges?
Yeah, I think this is going to be really, really interesting to see how our participants.
It looks like you can select more than one option here too, right? So.
Yep. It's a multiple choice journal receiver cleanup. We see that quite a bit. Of course, spool file cleanup. We love and hate spool files at the same time. IFS directory cleanup. That's quite the black hole. And I see this on some of my demo systems, of course. Tom backed up the library before he did an update, and lo and behold, we've got multiple copies of the library out there. Hey, we got a lot of activity going on here, Tom. This is going to be interesting.
Good to see.
All right,
let's
go ahead and close the poll and share it.
Oh, it looks really small on my end, so you're going to have to read it off if you can see it.
So about a quarter say journal receiver cleanup, about half say spool file cleanup, more than half say save file cleanup, 3/4 IFS directory cleanup, and more than half multiple library, multiple copies of libraries out there. So that is the challenge that we've got.
Yeah, I think that IFS one is an interesting one. One of the more popular webinars I do is Inside the IFS, and we're actually going to be doing that, a new flavor of that, updating a little bit and presenting that in February via the Common Organization. So for those of you who want to know more about the IFS and need to help keeping up with it, we'll be doing that. So our agenda today is good storage practices. So we talked about the bad things already. Let's talk about the good. Identifying data changes, why that's important, and then storage cleanup automation. And then Chuck's going to do a little demo of the Robot Space product from Help Systems and show how that works, and that could be a tool that could help you out. All right,
Tom. We talked about the bad. Yeah, we talked about the bad. Let's talk about the good.
Absolutely.
So what would you consider to be good storage practices? First of all, developers are not on your production systems, except if there is some kind of an issue. Okay, so unless you've got the world's greatest object level security on your production system, which we hope you do, that would even satisfy Robin Tatum, our global security expert on IBM i, keeps the developers off the production system, because what's going to happen? They're going to create duplicate copies of libraries and so forth. They're going to leave save files out there, and all of a sudden your system is kind of messy. Second bullet that we want to talk about is storage cleanup is automated. So we're talking about those purge processes. I talked about the purge processes that are built into our tools. You must have those not just configured, but automated. All right, have them in a scheduling tool like Robot Schedule, the built-in scheduler somewhere, so that they're actually doing something. Also, you need to take the time to examine whether or not you have duplicate libraries out there, maybe test data, get that cleaned up. And then you've got the day-to-day challenges of cleaning up old journals that are maybe used for your HA data replication tool. Make sure those old save files that were used for product updates are removed, old installs and so forth. Get that stuff cleaned up, because all of that data is reflected in your backup rules and your HA rules. So you might have to tweak your backup rules slightly, maybe to exclude certain libraries. I don't know if you guys knew you could do that, but you can exclude libraries from your save processes. And likewise, Tom, you talk a lot about modifying your HA rules.
Yeah, and HA too most products will have a purge function in there for your journal receivers where they'll automatically manage it. But again, never assume. You should still look at your storage and see if there's, problems out there where some old journal receivers haven't been cleaned up.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on, Tom. So I love this. Tom, I want you to give me one of these t-shirts for Christmas. I don't often test my code, but when I do it in production. So the point is, one thing we talk about is developers aren't on a production system from a security standpoint, but how about from a storage standpoint? All right, so going back and having to clean up after developers, because typically that won't happen just as a matter of course. So separate those developer duties onto a different partition. It's a lot easier nowadays to spin up a second partition or a third partition to give to the developers to test their code on. All right, and in terms of monitoring, of course, there's a number of tools out there for doing consistent monitoring, and not just monitoring when you exceed a threshold. That's built into the system. Typically, it might be 80, 85, 90% storage. But how about a growth warning? All right, how would you go about doing that? We're going to show you how to do that today in Robot Space. Consistently examining what's out there on a weekly or monthly basis. All right, how would you go about doing that? Well, you can use the retrieve disk info and start examining libraries and directories that way. Spreadsheets, of course, and all that gets to be somewhat laborious. So there are tools out there that can make things a little bit easier on you. All right, now what is the frequency that you want to do this? Well, how about monthly or even quarterly if you've got libraries out there that just aren't being used? Okay, take a look at the last used data on the library. In terms of automated cleanup, we've got a lot of spool files out there, decades of spool files, a lot of good tools out there. We've got tools that help systems for getting spool files off the system because, that's one area of storage that can get very, very disorganized very quickly. So getting them into an indexed document management tool can go a long way, not only to saving you space, but saving you time just from spool file retrieval. Clean up your old save files, of course, and then journal receivers, if they're old and unused, especially from an HA tool, get those off your system, delete them.
And we probably don't talk enough about IFS objects here too, but having some kind of tool for aging IFS objects off too is a good idea, and at least identifying them.
Yep.
There's a couple different things we have in our product line. Robot has something, Robot Schedule, I should say, and then of course Robot Space, as Chuck talked about. So let's identify data changes and why that's important. I say know your data, right? I recognize some names out there. I see a few of you. I know you've been with your companies for many years, so you probably know your data. But the importance is for when it comes to backup and HA, your backup and HA strategies should reflect your changing data. In other words, data that's changing more often, we back up more often. And of course, we want to pay attention to that from an HA perspective. So this becomes your most important aspect of backup and recovery. It's also the data that we want to make sure we can recover and we know how to recover it. So, the comment always in the backup and recovery area is you don't have a backup if you've never tested restoring it. So you have to test that just like you have to test programs. And then really, why back up and replicate data that's stagnant, right? It's never changing. Is it better to possibly, as Chuck talks about, archive it off the system, save it, and put it off on a tape or VTL or wherever you store things? And then really extra data impacts the length of backups and the performance of your high availability technology, whether you're using storage-based replication or logical journaling, they all have to replicate all this additional data that exists out there. There are some great commands to help you out there built into the operating system. Retrieve disk info at lives and IFS level. It gives you that capability. We also have some things in Robot Schedule. There's the old print disk space report, but it only does libraries. And then in Robot Space, there's Collection Explorer. And then I'd be failed too to not mention that there is a new version of the IBM I Navigator, and there's some things in there too. Again, the difference with the robot products, Chuck, when it comes down to is automation. You talked about automating things, and that's what's really important. So why don't you know your data, right? You're new, right? You lost all that tribal experience. So what are you going to do? Well, if it's me, the first thing I do as a new systems admin at any company is I'm going to be running some form of weekly disk analysis so that I can quite start seeing what's changing. I do a lot of high availability engagements with customers these days and talking to them about, you know, what should be replicated. And it's amazing the number of people that don't really know their libraries and their directories that are changing. You know, it might also be that it's never been your responsibility. Maybe you were a developer and I was like, well, all I had to worry about in development was writing new code and who cares about storage, right? Now it's your responsibility. It hasn't been a priority. Maybe your disk space has always been at 50% and never a big deal, but all of a sudden now you're up in the 80% range and you're like, oh, I can't go ask management for more hardware again. Then the other part of it is the reason you don't know your data is somebody else is controlling it and has controlled it, and it just hasn't been your responsibility. So I believe that knowing your data and is everybody's responsibility in IT, because that's also what we're securing, right? You're securing your business data from the bad hackers of the world. That's what we want to protect our system from. So let's talk about storage cleanup automation. Chuck, I know that this is a big thing
Yeah.
for you.
Well, yeah, exactly. So here's a laundry list of things that you should be looking at. All right, save files. This is probably the most common offender that we see. Save files were left on the system, so identify those. When was the last time they were used? When were they created? They're probably sitting on a backup someplace, so go ahead and get those off your system. Journal receivers, all right? So there is QAuthJourn. Of course, some of this information is cleaned up automatically. We'll talk about that in a minute, but there are the database journal receivers that are used by HA software, right? And then there's also the journaling that happens just to journal before and after records, all right? So typically those would need to get saved before they get deleted. Database journal receivers, maybe not so much. So after a week or two, certainly they should be gone off your system. ISO images, all right? So for doing a cumulative PTF applications, technical refreshes, OS upgrades, and so forth, those are sitting in your IFS. All right, let's get those off the system after they've been applied, maybe after a couple of weeks. IFS file. So what's an example of an IFS file that you could probably purge off the system? How about you're converting spool files into PDFs? All right, how long do those PDF files need to sit in the IFS before they're really old and moldy and stale? All right, maybe 6 months, maybe 3 months, maybe even less than that. So, you know, agree on how often those should be purged off your system. Reorganizing physical files, we see this, of course. Typically, that's something that takes a little bit of analysis and a little bit of downtime, although there is reorg while active. As long as the files are being journaled, you can use reorg while active. Duplicate libraries were mentioned, all right? So identifying those and maybe having a consistent naming convention for when libraries are backed up on the same partition.
Or better yet, restrict who can create libraries on the system, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we're back to the security standpoint. So certainly that's a factor. Old archive data, you know, those history files, how long do you need to keep that data out there? Get those spool files moved into an appropriate place, not just sitting in an out queue. And then after a certain point, you're going to purge those, you know, and any temporary storage used by applications.
Yeah, really, we should mention indexing too. If you do a work sys status, you'll see temporary storage and you'll see your indexing. If you haven't IPL'd your system for a while, that's something to pay attention to, because it can't, you know, if you never IPL your system, it can crash because of either temporary storage or going over your indexing levels. Something to watch out for.
Yeah, so let's talk about automation. All right, so there is the Go Cleanup. We should all be familiar with that, the Go Cleanup options. Make sure those are set appropriately. If you've not looked at that, do so. You can write your own CL programs to do some cleanup if you have the time and the knowledge to do that. Doesn't give you a whole lot of flexibility. You know, it's best if some of those cleanup processes are table-based so that you can change aging options and so forth. Make sure your business application, even if it's a utility like one of the Help Systems products, make sure you have the purges scheduled. And if you don't know how, ask the vendor.
And if I could jump in there, Chuck, I do know there's a company called Arc Tools out there that does have purges for some of the popular Infor ERPs and Oracle ERPs that exist out there. It's called Arc Tools, ARC-TOOLS.
Great
Something.
tip.
Mm-hmm.
Great tip. Yep. A couple other tips that folks should know about. Of course, they know about reorganized physical file member, but there's also the reorg while active, and all it requires is that the file be journaled, and then you can use that technology. So do a little reading on that. Certainly get all those cleanups scheduled in a tool like Robot or in the native scheduler or AGS someplace. And then how about the IFS? How long should those stream files be sitting out there? You don't want to just blindly go about purging the IFS. That could cause some pain and some heartburn, but identify what can be cleaned up in the IFS, especially PDF type directories. And then we have a number of storage audits and cleanup that we can do using Robot Space. Tom, let's talk about that.
Yeah, so Robot Space is a product we've had around for quite a few years. It's a tool that we often forget about, but it's going to look at QTemp library size, job temporary storage, spool files, ASPs, independent ASPs, and proactively monitor those things and warn you, because part of it is knowing there's a potential issue going on. And then, of course, it does full library and IFS storage analysis. Chuck will show some of that. And one of the things I always said is a picture is worth more than just a list or a report. So up in the right-hand corner, we have the usage report that'll break down storage by owner. So sometimes showing your developers that, hey, look at Jeff Pedretti up there is the big red pie, piece of the pie. If you email that around your department and development, generally everybody will chuckle, but then Jeff will go, I guess I do look like I'm wasting a lot of disk space. And hopefully that'll motivate him to clean it up. We also have those storage audit cleanups that Chuck will talk a bit about that help automate this area of reorgs and save files and IFS aging. And then we got trending and certainly notification in the product. Here's the cleanups. Chuck's going to show this online, but we can look for duplicate libraries, clean up save files, age IFS objects off the system, delete unused journal receivers, all these things that need to be automated from a cleanup and storage perspective. And then we also do, we have a tape management product called Robot Save, and we also have BRMS, right? And both products do have archiving capability too, where you can actually have the product do a save of a library and do storage free and actually use the HMS or HSM support to save it off. Or if not that, you can use the archiving, just save the library and say, hey, when I save this library, I want to keep it around for 10 years on tape so that it doesn't get purged or nobody writes over the volume IDs is what I should really say. But so that's another option for you is to look at your backup and recovery tool and make sure that you're using it appropriately. And then of course, high availability, you could say that this is actually going to cause storage consumption. Of course it will, because now we're journaling everything and we're sending things from one system to another. But the nice thing is like a tool like Robot HA will automatically keep purging off the journal receivers as we use them. So the importance here is making sure that we've set the product up properly to do that, but taking advantage of remote journaling for that dynamic data that you need instance copies of on target systems for HA or DR purposes. So, all right. Well, Chuck, we want to save a little time for live demo. So should I make you presenter or did you already take control?
Tell you what, I'll go ahead and do that. And I'll share my screen.
Yeah, let's have you show us a little bit of Robot Space, I think is the plan, right?
Yeah. All right, let me know when you can see my screen.
I can see your PowerPoint screen.
Oh,
so,
all right.
Yeah, first time in this product called GoToWebinar, right, Chuck?
No. Here we go. Hang on.
Now, while Chuck gets this,
there we go.
That's looking better. Yeah. There's the Robot Space Explorer.
Yeah, so Robot Space is exclusively a graphical product, all right, and it's a tool for managing IBM i storage. And I'm going to talk about cleanups mostly, but I want to talk first of all about the monitoring. So we can monitor your sysspace, your independent ASPs, your other user ASPs, and you can set thresholds, including a growth threshold. All right, how much has my storage grown in the last hour? And then you can send out notification through this tool. And of course, what we're doing is we're capturing history as well. So you can see here, I've got history going back on my storage back to August of 2020, where you can see we had a little spike. All right, and at that point, we added some storage, but ultimately what we did is we proactively got notified before we exceeded our storage, identified what the issue was, and addressed it. Tom mentioned temporary storage, job temporary storage, job queue temp storage, and so forth. So we can also set thresholds over that and do notification. And as you can see, we've got a SQL job here, internal SQL job that absolutely peaked out on us. All right. Let's look at our Collection Explorer. So what this does is it takes a snapshot of your storage once a day, once a week, couple times a day. It's kind of up to you to identify what is consuming storage, let's say from a library standpoint. So what's the largest library on my system? All right, well, I've got QPFR data here, but you know what? We got Heath. You were talking about Jeff. Let's look at Heath. He's got quite a bit of storage that he's using up. Let's see what's in his library. All right, so we can drill into Heath's library, and I'm going to guess that there's some large objects out there in his library.
It looks like you got your filter set to save file too, so maybe change your filter so people can see that it's not. You see that up there?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Just do the quick filter. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So here we go. We've got a huge physical file.
Yeah. So you would have missed that.
Exactly. Yeah. And has that file been growing, or has it just been kind of steady out there? If we look at the size history going back to January 21, it's just sitting there. All right. That's the history going back to January. It was created November of 2019, and it was last used in July of 2020. Okay, that's pretty stagnant data, Tom. Right?
Yep. I would agree.
All right. So let's look at objects now. All right.
So this is going to show me the biggest object on the system.
Yeah. All right. So it's this particular physical file. We can say, oh, let's look at the size history behind this. You can see it's growing. All right. But let's narrow things down. I'm going to filter things by save files only. All right. Let's just see what save files are out there on my system. All right, so what this is doing is going through the complete list, and sure enough, those Heath save files are out there. All right, we've got some program product update files from our HS load manager that can be cleaned up. Okay, so what I could do here is I could identify the save files that need to be cleaned up and literally create a report on the fly, choosing which fields I want, all right, and create a report and send that off to those people who might be able to address that. Let's go down to the file member, Tom.
Okay.
All right. So this is file member level. Yeah, and I'm looking at physical files only. I'm not looking at logical files in this case. But here's a file that has a lot of deleted records. Okay. Once again, I could highlight those files with the most deleted records. Say, create me a report of those. And let's just do a preview so you can see what that looks like. So basically, these are files that need to be reorged. Okay, so you can either create a CL program, you could reorg them manually, or you could use our audit to do that.
Storage audits, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so here's another question, Tom. What's changed? What's changed in our system? Let's look at it from the IFS standpoint. All right, what's changed in the IFS? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select IFS directories just to give you an idea. Well, here's where we are right now as of November 28th in this case.
Yeah, so this is going to pre-store it. That's your largest IFS directory. And again, you You have that drill capability too, right? You can
We
drill
do.
in
We could drill into that. But what I wanted to do was I'm going to do a comparison. I'm going to select
all the way
two.
back to March. Wow.
I'm going to go back to March, and I'm just going to say let's compare our IFS directories. What's changed the most in the land of IFS?
Hmm.
All right. Maybe I've identified that that's our issue.
This is
All
where
right,
we
so,
have to sing some holiday music or something, right?
well, it's crunching a lot of numbers, Tom. Here it comes. All right, drum roll.
Ooh.
Oh, and here you go. All right, so it says that our cumulative PTF directory has changed the most, and it might not necessarily be because objects in it have changed, but maybe you have new objects. All right, so we also keep track of the number of objects.
Very handy.
So that's just a quick glimpse at.
Yeah, I know we're going to run out of time here, Chuck. So maybe hop over to storage audits just to show that they exist.
Yeah, let's do that. So I've got a storage audit that runs as a batch process that cleans up old spool files, creates a report of newer restored objects, cleans up IFS objects after a certain amount of time, deletes unused save files after a certain amount of time, deletes unused journal receivers from our HA product, and also proactively looks at those physical files that are almost full. And there's a lot more that you can do in terms of cleaning up your system. So here's what we're doing, and here are all those things that are available. All right, Tom, let's finish up. I'm going to launch a polling question.
You're going to launch a polling question. All right. Oops. There. Hopefully you're seeing that screen now.
All right. How can Help Systems help you? Maybe you'd like a security scan. That's a free service that we do for our PowerTech product line. It looks at, gives you a high-level security check on your IBM I partition. We also do a product health check. So if you'd like us to look at one of your robot or PowerTech or SQL product or Showcase, we can take a look at that for you. Tech update. What's a tech update, Tom?
Well, technology update is just simply we discuss what's on your roadmap, we share with what's on our roadmap, and then what's new at Help Systems. That's kind of the main emphasis of tech updates. And of course, we tailor that to what the customer is using from a server perspective. Is it all IBM I, Windows, Unix, Linux? So they are very tailored.
Yeah, and if you'd like a demo of Robot Schedule, certainly we can do that. Robot Space.
Yeah. Well, we can demo Robot Schedule too. I guess that's the question, right?
Sure. Automate your cleanup, and then professional services, additional training. Maybe you have Robot Space right now and just don't know how to get the most out of it. Be happy to help you with that.
Yeah. Very good.
All right.
All right. So that's that. Time for questions and answers. Let's see if we have any of those in our list here while you leave that open.
All right.
Does Robot Space do notification, or how does it do it, Chuck?
Yeah, it does. So if a threshold is exceeded, maybe a growth rate threshold, we can put a message in a message queue. So you could pick it up with something like Robot Console, or we do interface directly to Robot Alert. All right, so you can use our tools for alerting, or you can just pick up on a message in a message queue. Those are the two typical, normal methods. You can also run a job.
Oh, sorry. Another question we have out there is, should I back up my journal receivers? You want me to take that one?
Yeah.
Okay, so with journal receivers, I recommend yes, because you might be journaling also for audit reasons, and having the journals in place, you can always go back and restore and look at what happened to your database. Now, if you're really concerned about it, there's two ways you can journal files. You can do after images, which just shows the after image before or after the update, or you can do both, where you can see both before and after images. So, well, that's probably it for our questions today, Chuck, and appreciate, oops, let's see, we might have another question. Will this work on V5R4? Technically, we probably do have a copy of Robot Space for V5R4 if you really have a system out there at that level, or is that just a quiz question? But yeah, we do have the ability to ship older versions of some products, and Robot Space is one that I'm very confident that we would be able to help you out on V5R4. That is what we have. Okay, love to help you out there. Oh, Chuck, we have some more questions. We have a file that had over 800 million records. I purged old records and now have almost 500 million deleted records that space need to be covered. When reorganizing on different LPAR, it took 5 days. Any suggestions for prod LPAR reorg? Any suggestions? I guess I would look at your work management, see where your reorg's running. Do you have enough memory in there? I would look at time slice, but you can do.
Yeah, might be easier to talk to your developers. It might be easier to just copy the file. That would be one way to get rid of the deleted records.
That's a good point too. Yeah, you can copy the file to another spot and it won't bring over the deleted records. It just depends upon, it's a kind of an involved question because we have to look at downtime and some of those things too, what you have available, if any. Probably not if you have a file that big. But that would be a couple different suggestions on that. Okay. All right. Well, that is, yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. You guys have a great day. And I guess, Chuck, we better move on because I'm sure like me, you have other meetings coming up too. So thank you all.
All right.
Have a great day.
Okay. Bye-bye.